So I'm basically going to talk about some of the basics of weather, specifically wind direction and strength, and I'm going to talk about some of the kit that's available. Um, so yeah, let's begin. All right, so when we sail, it's going to be really important to know what direction the wind's coming from. In fact, it's important to know that before we even go sailing, because we're going to want to, if we're just cruising, we're going to want to figure out how easy it's going to be to get somewhere. But even when we rig, we're going to want to put the boat head to wind. So we need to know where the wind's coming from. So over to you guys. What are some good ways you can tell what the wind direction is?
Got a birdie on my mast.
Yeah, great idea. Here's mine.
Look at the big windmill down the club.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good one. There's a giant wind turbine next to the club, and that's pretty good at telling you where wind's coming from.
And I've got the Met forecast that tells me which way the wind direction.
Yeah, fantastic forecast. Yeah, how else can we tell? Maybe on the water.
Well, you put your boat in
your face. Sorry, just saying with your face, where you're feeling it, which side of your face?
Yeah, good one. All right. Yeah, basically this is all the ones I could possibly think of. Like so one good way is to look at things on the shore, like wind turbines, smoke, wind vanes, windsocks. Another thing you can do is look at indicators on your boat, like these little gadgets. They're both wind indicators you can attach to the boat. You can look at the waves. They'll always be coming roughly from the same direction as the wind. My personal favorite is when you're sailing, you can feel the wind on the back of your head. And if you turn your head till you feel it equally on both ears, you're pointing downwind. So that's personally how I do it. Yeah, all right. So that's you've got to think about the wind direction pretty much. You've got to have some kind of awareness almost constantly of where it's coming from when you sail. Oh yeah, one more thing that used to catch me out before. When people say westerly, they don't mean that the wind is pointing towards the west. They mean it's coming from the west. So yeah, like that's just worth bearing in mind if you're not used to wind directions. Okay, next, let's talk about wind speed. So to gauge wind speed, we've got the Beaufort scale, and it's like an empirical scale between 0 and 12, and each one has got like a description of what happens to the sea and what happens to the land, like what happens on land, and a wind speed range. So I've just lifted this from Wikipedia, and I highly recommend that everyone goes and has a look, because it tells you exactly what might happen in each of the conditions, in terms of like, at sea and on land. So when you're sailing, you can tell what wind force it is by looking at the water, by feeling on your face, and when you're on land, you can tell as well. So yeah, this is what sailors use, the Beaufort scale. The wind range we like to sail in is between force 2 and 4. Maybe sometimes we'll push the boundary a bit, and experienced sailors might go out in force 5 or force 6, but probably only when there's a safety boat out. But the best wind conditions to learn in are force 2 and force 3. Anything below force 2 it's sort of not that much fun because you don't move very fast. And anything above force 8 is like crazy. It's really dangerous. So yeah, between force 2 and force 4 is nice conditions, and sometimes maybe a bit stronger than that can sometimes be fun. All right, so let's go through some of the wind forces that we can actually sail in. So force 0, you turn up at the club, and it's a beautiful day, but there's no wind at all. And what you'll notice in force 0 is it's like a mirror. There's not even ripples on the surface. Smoke rises vertically on land, and it's like you might be out on your boat, but it's impossible to actually sail. Like what happens is the sail just kind of droops, and because you're not moving, you can't. You wiggle the rudder, but it doesn't. Nothing happens. You can't even feel like the tiller, so you can't really steer. It's the tide's still there, and the tide's still going to take you wherever it wants to go. So on the lake we can sit it out. On the river we have to be a little bit careful. So generally we probably wouldn't sail in this. Okay, then the wind picks up slightly. We're in force 1. Force 1 is a good picture I could find of force 1, and there's starting to be ripples on the surface. And if you notice these little diagonal ripples, that's away from the boat. It's enough to actually get your boat moving, but it's not easy to sail in force 1. I'd actually say it's a bit challenging, and it's not particularly exciting. And on land, you'll see smoke start to drift, but it's not powerful enough to rotate wind vanes. Okay, wind picks up a little bit more. Force 2. So that's enough for you to start to get these ripples, and you can actually, you can't go through water. You can feel it moving. You can feel the steering, and you can feel the power in the sail basically, and it's quite good. What it's really good for is, if you've never sailed before, it's really good for learning how to tack in almost like a very like gentle, comfortable environment. In fact, it's good for learning anything. So yeah, and it's strong enough to move little leaves about on the ground and move wind vanes. Wind picks up a bit more. Now we've got force 3. And then the waves start to get a little bit wider, like maybe this sort of width and about this sort of height. But not really enough to affect your boat too much. So you also start to see leaves and twigs moving. It's enough to sort of raise light flags. And this is where when wind's like, when you feel the wind on the sail, it actually like means you have to start moving your weight around to balance the boat in a dinghy. But it's still quite gentle. It's nice, good conditions to learn things in. Okay, wind picks up a bit more. Force 4. And this is where it starts to get like really fun. And like the boat can like take off and start planing. But to balance the boat, we've actually got to get bums over the side and properly lean out of the boat, and that's called hiking. And sometimes in some places you'll get some waves that might actually affect the motion of the boat. It's enough to, like, you can't leave paper lying around outside on land because it'll get blown away. Yeah, and you'll see small branches starting to sway in the wind. So for people that have never sailed before sailing out force 4, we'd reef. And reefing is where you reduce the sail area, and there's different reefing in every boat. So, but we'll get onto that some other time. Yeah, reefing, the reason we do it is because in stronger winds, it can overpower us, and it can be dangerous sometimes. So if we want to get more, like, if we want more control of the boat, we can reduce our sail area, and it'll be a lot easier for us. If you think the wind's a little bit strong before you go out and you're wondering whether to reef, it's probably a good idea to reef. But I think also on yachts, it can actually be faster if you reef kind of earlier, sooner rather than later. All right, planing. Essentially, that's when the boat like starts it's going so fast that it skims across the water, and it's really good fun. This is one of the things we live for as dinghy sailors. And I say in this type of boat, which is laser, it can happen in force 4. But yeah, this is really, really good. Something else I mentioned is hiking, and that's where rather than just sitting on the side, we put our feet under the toe strap. The toe strap, if you can see this picture on the right, these like blue straps, and the idea is you put your feet under these toe straps, and you put your bottom over the side, and you lean out to give yourself like the most leverage you can, and that's how we keep the boat flat in stronger winds. Oh yeah, white horses. So when we're talking about wind strength, people talk about white horses a lot, and it's where the top of the wave sort of blows into kind of like a small amount of foam or spray. But the reason it's useful is because you get different amount of white horses depending on like the wind strength. And I'd say you don't get any until force 3. Sometimes you might get the occasional one. Then you'll get a few more than force 4. Force 5 and 6 will be everywhere. So it's a bit of a useful indicator as to the wind strength. Oh yeah, force 5, yeah, it gets really physical. But I think you got to, yeah, force 5 is where it starts to get windy. So yeah, recap, Beaufort scale, the best wind strengths to sailing are probably force 2 to 4, and maybe force 5 and 6 if you're an experienced sailor. Does anyone have any questions about the Beaufort scale or any of the wind direction, wind strength stuff?
Yeah, you were talking about planing. What point of sail would you be doing planing?
So in most boats, you can only plane on you can plane on it's usually downwind. So you'll be on a reach or a run. For everyone that's not familiar with reaching or running or points of sail, we'll talk about another one of these. But essentially, it's usually downwind in fairly strong winds. But there are some boats that can plane upwind, but that's not very common.
Hi, John. A question from myself. You've been talking about what's safe and what isn't for dinghies. Does the same sort of scale apply to cruisers, or is it a different scale?
I'm afraid I'm not very experienced at cruiser sailing, so I'll have to pass that one over to Jeremy.
Yes. Yeah, so the Beaufort scale applies to everything on the water. So it was designed by a naval officer, Admiral Beaufort, and it's named after him. It was used for warships initially, and it's just spread through the maritime world. The rule of thumb, as I was always taught it, was a force 5 is known as a yachtsman's gale, and usually in a force 5, sensible yachtsmen are considering reefing the mainsail or the front sail, called a jib or a genoa. But as you can imagine, in the lower parts of the Beaufort scale, then sort of 0 to 2, a yacht tends to need a bit more wind if it's a largish yacht to give it the oomph to sail. A force 4 is a lovely sort of wind speed to be sailing in, and then as you progressively go up the scales, you are not only reducing your sail area, but you're also wondering why you didn't disappear into the first port to be in the bar while watching the horrific weather outside. I'd say the worst weather I've been in is a force 8 to 9, and I can tell you that as a semi-religious person, I properly put on my God hat in the hope that we get through it, because the skipper hadn't actually prepared for those conditions. But a lot of a really comfortable sail in a dinghy is up to a 4, a 5 if you're out for the thrills and spills, and a cruiser it's a 4 to a 5. And then when you start getting to a 6, you are properly reefed down, and it can be exhilarating. But yeah, it's a lot of it also is down to your own experience and your confidence. If you stand on the slipway at Erith, your boat is rigged, and you look out there and you're with a crew, and you look at each other and you go, do we want to go for a sail? And the answer is actually, I'm not up for it, then don't go sailing. And that will reflect a sensible decision that you've made based on your own experience and on the conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, should we talk about clothing?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so in this next bit, I'm going to talk about what kit is available for dinghy sailors. And if you give me a sec, I'm just going to transfer to the phone. So I'm going to talk about what sailing kit's available. And if anyone's new to sailing, I don't suggest going out and buying all the kit straight away. It's the sort of thing you gradually accumulate. Back to neoprene. It's a material that wetsuits are made out of, and it traps a thin layer of water between you and it. And the idea is your body heats up that water, and it doesn't really escape. And it's really, really good. So if you're wearing a wetsuit and you get wet, it really does work. So when you sail, the first time you get wet is usually when you walk in the water to launch the boat. So you probably want to be wearing something on your legs that is either wetsuit material or is going to dry out or not restrict your movement too much. So here are some dinghy sailing boots. They're made of neoprene and rubber. So I think you want something that's kind of a little bit hard wearing because you're going to be putting your toes under the toe straps, and you're going to be walking on a slipway to launch or recover your boat. But I think to start with, trainers are fine, just old trainers, because they're going to get very muddy. You also get neoprene socks, and it's also worth maybe eventually getting some gloves, because you're going to be pulling ropes a lot. So it's probably fine when you're cruising, or maybe just for like an afternoon. But if you want to do a whole day of racing, it helps to have gloves to prevent rope burn. All right, so yeah, the other thing that can get you a bit wet is spray. So what's quite useful is like a waterproof, but there's waterproofs available from a club actually to borrow, but I think everyone's got waterproofs. So this is an aqua fleece, and it's a fleece on the inside, and it's polyurethane. It's waterproof polyurethane on the outside. It's really good. What else? So I talked about wetsuits. I don't actually have a wetsuit, but what I do have is hiking shorts, which is kind of like the shorts from a wetsuit, but they've got padded I've got pads in the back, and that helps you hike out of the boat without like your legs getting less tired. So it's like an extra kind of extension of a boat almost. And I've got that's effectively a wetsuit t-shirt. Something I've also got to recommend is if you wear a wetsuit, it might be worth wearing a rash vest underneath, because neoprene can cause a rash after like a day of wearing it. And also, I'd say a rash vest makes a really good. It makes a really good like t-shirt in warm weather that you can sail in. So yeah, other than that, sometimes it's warm enough just to wear shorts and a t-shirt.
So John, what's the most important piece of kit?
I'll get to that.
Yeah.
There is one. Okay, I'll talk about it now. There is one bit of kit that I would never ever go in the water without, and that is this one. It's a buoyancy aid, and the idea is if you fall out of a boat, you can if you wear that, you'll be absolutely fine, because it'll keep your head above water and you can just sort of you don't have to tread water because you'll just be floating there. Yeah, finally, there's dry suits, and they're really good because it means you can just wear ordinary clothes underneath, ordinary warm clothes, and it means you can sail during winter. And this is my dry suit, but they're quite expensive, and they're also like have a nasty habit of developing leaks. But yeah, like this is really, really good. I wouldn't go sailing in winter without one. And this is good as well. That's a thermal onesie that I wear underneath my dry suit. So I think, oh yeah, one more thing, headgear. Yeah. So if you lose 90% of body heat out of your head, it's worth wearing something in your head. And I've got like a snuddery cap, and that's a hat made from the same material as that aqua fleece. And that's pretty much it, apart from dry bag. That's good for keeping your phone in, and your money to buy a pint when you get to the pub. And oh yeah, I just wanted to show you some examples of really bad kit. So that is a pair of jeans and a jumper. Yeah, if I were you, I would never sail in, or never let anyone sail in a woolly jumper or a pair of jeans. And the reason is because woolly jumpers absorb water. They just absorb water and weigh you down, and it's just not nice. But then jeans, like when they get wet, they actually restrict your movement and start chafing. So yeah, but I used to sail in jeans all the time, but I wouldn't recommend that anyone does it. So yeah, I might as well pass to Jerry, and then you can talk about yacht kit.
Yeah. Okay. So very, very briefly, on a yacht, you have the luxury of generally staying in your own clothing. One piece of advice I shall always give people who sail on yachts, especially on long trips: never wear white pants. But I won't go into detail why, but it's a valuable piece of information. So going back into the kits that you would wear on a yacht, you don't necessarily need to wear a buoyancy aid. What you can wear is a life jacket. Now I seem to have lost myself on the screen. Hold on a minute, let me just find myself. There we go. So on you have this is a life jacket. It's much thinner. It's means you've got more maneuverability because you're running around the yacht, you're pulling on ropes and so on. There are two main types. There are those that are manual, so they've got a gas canister, a 33-gram CO2 canister in them, and you can either pull the cord and the life jacket will explode into life, or the one I've got, if you fall in the water, it dissolves a cube of salt and then it activates automatically. There will be different reasons why you might want a manual one over an automatic, but they're really valuable, and I am not always good at wearing them, but I do recommend that people should wear a life jacket, especially if you're out in more open waters than the River Thames, because it will save your life. The RNLI say if you're not going to wear it, then it won't save your life. So always wear it, always have it done up properly. And if it's got crutch straps, then wear them as well, because otherwise the life jacket can easily just come off over your head. The other two bits of kit I will show you. So if it's cold or it's getting wet, you can wear these are foul weather bottoms. They can be expensive, or you can get them fairly cheap. If you go to someone like Decathlon, you can get a lot of your sailing kit very cheaply. So these are waterproof, they windproof, they'll keep you warm. They're really good unless you wear glasses, because the hood on the jacket has a really irritating habit of knocking your glasses off. So make sure your glasses are also tied on, and you can get, as I have, having lost 3 pairs of glasses in the River Thames, and then had to spend a week without any, you can get glasses strings, and always have more than one. have one on the glasses and one in your buoyancy aid if you wear a buoyancy aid, or in your pocket, because you're always going to lose them. I do. And then you end up with random bits of string. But glasses, string, really important. This jacket has a high collar, and it has a hood that means you can wear a hat underneath it. But if it's pouring with rain, it just really protects you and still gives you the visibility that you need. And then finally, the final thing are your yacht boots. So you can get really, really expensive yachty boots, or you can get cheaper ones. These happen to be offshore ones. They've got gaiters on the outside of them, so your foul weather trousers would go over that, and then the gaiter would go over the top. They don't all come with that. These just happen to be a bit more expensive, but they protect your feet from being stubbed against shackles, the rigging, or anything like that. They're really useful, and they're very hard wearing. So yeah, that's what I would say. In addition to wearing your hat and your gloves and so on, but you should always prepare for the worst and be pleasantly surprised when you don't need to wear it all. What I'd say.
You don't necessarily, in its own foul weather, mostly for the boots. I mean, I wear just deck shoes as well.
That's right. I do have deck shoes. They're upstairs, yeah. But you're right. The boots are really, really useful if the weather is appalling, or it's just wet, because they'll keep your feet warm and dry. And if you have leaky yacht boots like I have, I wear waterproof socks inside them, and that resolves that problem. So you don't then have to buy a new set of boots. So I think that's probably everything I've got to say. Unless, John, do you want me just to do the weather forecasts as homework for them, so we can let other people join us?
Should we do a quick Q&A, see if anyone's got any questions about kits?
Yeah, very quickly, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, over to you guys on the call.
So yeah, if you've got any questions, guys, just ask.
I just wanted to add, so I'm very much a beginner sailor, but I've done a reasonable amount of mountaineering and climbing with my college, and I can absolutely back what you were saying about decathlon. It saved us just hundreds and thousands of pounds over the years. I've gotten perfectly great waterproofs that have lasted me years, really hard wearing. All of our kit really as a college club, we often get from Decathlon, and I just can't recommend it enough. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think it's like a really great place. When I started sailing with my college, I went to this ocean leisure place at Embankment, and the wetsuits were scarily expensive. I got really freaked out. It was £400 or £500 for a wetsuit.
What?
Yeah, I mean some of them were cheaper than that, but I got my wetsuit from Decathlon for I think £45. So I was just I got dinghy boots, a wetsuit. I think total about 60 quid, and a really helpful person that knew quite a lot about yacht gear as well. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to put my 2 pennies worth in there.
Ooh, one more thing about wetsuits. So there's sailing wetsuits, and there's diving wetsuits, and there's kayaking wetsuits, but it doesn't really matter which one you go for, because they're all the same. They're just different makes, which probably focus on different people.
The only difference is, John, the higher the millimetre, the less more restricted they are.
Oh, right.
They're not quite so stretchy. So the diving ones are 5 to 7s, and they're more restricted for sailing in. So I'd recommend the lower ones, mils.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, I've got a 5mm thick winter weight wetsuit, which I used to wear instead of a dry suit, because the dinghy I raced on or sailed on was such a high performance boat that if you were in a dry suit, you basically suffer from heat exhaustion by the end of it. So the 5mm one was just a way of keeping me comfortable. But again, something that's a 3mm wetsuit that for most of the year is usually pretty good. But if you're then wearing a spray top and a spray bottom, that will keep
and a rash vest.
And a rash vest, or what I do, I'm always losing rash vests, so I now just use old t-shirts, because I find I never lose an old t-shirt, but I always lose an expensive rash vest. So but anyway, yeah.
Right. Weather?
Yeah, just very briefly, some homework for you for next week. For those of you who manage to join next week, we'd like you to compile a list of where you would get weather forecasts from, and then your homework will also include the weather forecast for the weekend, for next weekend. So we meet on the Thursday, so John and I'd be interested to know whether it's going to be sunny or cloudy, what the wind direction is going to be, how strong the wind is. Now, I don't mind if you do it in kilometers, miles per hour, or knots, and we can go through first thing next week what all of those, what knots is and what miles per hour and kilometers are, those sorts of things. So to make it easy for you, if you just choose London rather than Erith, that would be really good. But have a think about where you get sources of forecasts from, and also think analog rather than just digital. Sometimes if you don't have a computer, you have to find sources of weather forecasts in other ways. But if we haven't got any more questions, there are some eager people waiting to join us who are members.
I'm going to get a glass of wine.
So for those of you who aren't members or haven't met them, Alan Cooper is a long-standing member of Erith Yacht Club. I think he's one of our vice presidents. There's Alan Thomas, who's one of our powerboat instructors and dinghy instructors. And last year, he and his wife managed to get their yacht from Erith up to the Isles of Orkney and back again between lockdowns. And this year, they're planning to sail along the south coast to the Isles of Scilly and possibly to Ireland, assuming they get there and they get the weather. And Richard Banner is also a long-serving member. And if you persuade him to drink enough, he'll also sing you some sea shanties. So I think on that note, I shall be quiet and let John do his magic.